Welcome to this next episode of The Next Question. I've noted that in this first season, we're primarily focused on bringing in industry-relevant voices of leaders that are leading into this AI-driven inflection point. And while today's guest might not be overly known in the AV industry in a traditional sense, in many ways, he's tracked what we do and what we enable throughout his career. His journey started out as a roadie working behind the scenes in live production that evolved into corporate events and ultimately into event production and presenter coaching. So rather than perhaps connecting cables these days, he helps connect the ideas that drive impactful events. But that technical grounding and his understanding of the power of live communication, I think, still informs everything he does. So these days, he's best known as a global keynote speaker, author of challenging companies and their leaders to break business models and to top it off in terms of relevance to this moment, he's also relatively recently founder of an AI consultancy and fractional outsourcing company. So as you'll see in a moment, he tackles shaking the trees of status quo with all the tact of perhaps some of that irreverent honesty and so on that comes from some of that background of the rock and roll era even. So you'll see some of that energy in a second. So very excited to welcome Richard Mulholland to the podcast and to many of you for the first time. A type of voice I think we need more in this moment of change and reinvention, someone who knows enough about our industry to bring perspective but isn't embedded in it or trapped by it, someone who sees structure and opportunity but isn't afraid to challenge its assumptions. So with those lofty expectations of our discussion today, welcome, Rich.
Thanks, Byron. I'm stoked to be here. And I don't know if I'll live up to the expectations you set there, but I'll do my very best.
Always, and you always have. So I guess let's start with some of that journey that you've gone through of the last 20 more years of your industry perspective and so on. And I guess perhaps the opportunity for all in this moment to be able to step up and reinvent themselves over time from wherever they might sit within their career or their organizational hierarchy. So perhaps just for relevance to our industry, perhaps you can just briefly explain some of that journey that you've gone through.
I mean, I guess reinvention would be a somewhat, constant theme in my life. When I left school, I knew I wanted to be in some degree of sales or something, but the band Depeche Mode was coming to South Africa, and I really wanted to work on it. My dad was connected to the industry. I remember saying the words to him, "I will lick the stage clean for nothing. Just please get me some stagehand work." And both my dad and my sister are sound engineers, and I thought, I want to do something different. My dad was walking me towards the sound crew. And the week before, I'd seen OMD, and they had this incredible light show. And I said, is there any chance I can work on the lighting instead? And he took me across. I ended up just going back to back to back as a stagehand, not as full crew, with Depeche Mode, Aha, Bryan Adams. And then I kind of got noticed because I was putting up my hands for all the gigs. I then ended up getting involved, as a full-time lighting designer. But the only problem was in staging in South Africa at the time, there was no winter work. So in winter, people wouldn't go to concerts. Now, it's hilarious. I'm from Scotland and I live in the Isle of Man. If we didn't go to concerts when the weather was bad, there would be no concerts ever. But in South Africa, that wasn't the case. And so there was no work all of winter. So we all had to moonlight. I did some work in scaffolding and all kinds of different things. And I thought, this is crazy. And at the time, we were the second largest supplier of staging gear on the planet. Yet we didn't have work in winter. It seemed bizarre. And I quickly identified that the corporate market, they didn't care. The corporate market had events all year round. So I went to my boss, and it was 2 years to the day I had been on the road. And I said to him, listen, I want to come off the road and I want to start a corporate division. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be, but we called it PSL Conference Services. And we started a corporate division where we'd go to events and conferences and things like this. And we would try and give them a level of the technological boost that we were giving, performance artists. And so that was maybe the first part of my journey that got me into the AV space. I moved then from lighting to screens. We had the Barco 500s, and we were trying to, they were the big boys at the time, and just, create these incredible stage shows where AV was a big part. And then I quickly realized that it didn't matter how good the AV was. If the presenter was bad, it was bad. And so I then, a year later, split off. I started my own company, Missing Link, which was a presentation strategy firm. And I thought technology is not enough to fix a bad message. You have to fix the message itself. That was 28 years ago. The business still exists. We work all over the world, and it's been a cool journey.
Yeah, well, I think last I heard, I don't know if you've hit 50 yet, but the last time I heard 49 countries of touring and helping organizations tell their story, and indeed you telling their stories. So what I guess is different in that journey of years and 49 countries and so on, and perhaps what's the same in this new moment?
Well, so what is the same is that the fundamentals of storytelling, the way that we communicate well, has not changed. In fact, you have to go way further back to see that. I'm still employing the principles of Aristotle every time I get on stage. That fundamental has not changed. What has changed for me is, first of all, the role of AV as an effect, as opposed to just a thing that communicates an idea. That's fundamentally shifted in the live space. So it used to be that lighting created the effect and AV just, showed the video. Now AV is the effect. Almost everything exists. The screens are without a doubt, the centerpiece of all event. What has not changed is crews are still fundamentally lazy in the way that they deploy them. I was at an event last week and they had this beautiful panoramic stage set. And, it had an incredible aspect ratio. I could have adjusted my slides to be just magnificent. All that happened was I was a 16 by 9 picture in picture on a big screen that basically just had the client's logo and a rippling effect. And I thought, if you're going to spend this much on LED panels for the entire event, why are we not using it? That has unfortunately not changed. I think that crews are lazy and we're charging clients for incredible gear capable of doing amazing things and using them at 20% of their capability. And I've seen that throughout my career. It used to be the lighting that would do that. We'd have lights capable of doing these amazing things and they're just set in 3 looks. Now I see the same in screens, and that technology is so much better and capable of so much more.
Yeah, I think that's all certainly relevant, and yet here we are in a moment where creating content has never been easier, where at least the potential in some of these tools has never been easier. So I guess perhaps that leads to that premise of a bit of reinvention. You've been a serial entrepreneur. I've loved the conversations we've had over the years. I mean, in the events space, we all know we've been incredibly impacted by COVID and the changes that occur there, and now in this AI moment. And you've got a premise, I guess, of leaders in wherever they may sit have to disrupt themselves before something or someone does. In fact, you've actually shuttered elements of your business over the recent years by consistently doing that, challenging the relevance of what you were doing, and does that make sense? So perhaps perhaps you can just talk a little bit about even some of those journeys. But we all see and hear the stories of Netflix breaking their DVD business for online and so on, and those often seem far removed and abstract. Huge big companies reinventing, but you've had multiple small companies. You're in the same realm as most of the listeners of this podcast will be, in working in small to medium sized businesses and so on. So perhaps just talk us through some of that reinvention premise, and the importance of not being lazy, I guess, in these moments of opportunity.
Yeah, so you mentioned the word relevance quite a bit so far, and the last book that I wrote is called Relentless Relevance: Be a Threat to the Future Before the Future Threatens You. And I want to unpack that word a bit because I think it's fundamentally important to what you just asked me. So relevance is the state of being appropriate to the matter at hand. Okay, the state of being appropriate to the matter at hand. Now, of course, this begs the question then, what is the matter at hand? And most people, when we start companies, we fix problems or we fill gaps. So the solution we created was the solution to the matter at hand at the point at which we started our company. So when we start companies, we start off solving a problem. But later on, as our businesses grow, we move into the next phase of our business, which is refine the solution. Now, refining a solution is a great place to be because that's where you make more money. You're able to be more efficient in the way you deploy and get things out there, and everything's great. But actually what happens is eventually your business becomes difficult again. And the reason is that because of the work that you and other people like you have done, the problem has moved. So the matter at hand is now something fundamentally different. And we have not changed. We moved from being in the business of solving the problem to being in the business of selling the solution. And we need to fall in love with the problem again. And this is a core belief. Now, one change, for example, was way back in 2020. Obviously, we have a presentation company. We work in the events industry, and there was no events. And so we very, very quickly built what we called Cloud Crew division. We obviously did some work with you in a past life. And we realized that it was actually a great thing because selling presentation development and presentation skills is quite a tough sell because everyone thinks you're pretty good. But actually, during COVID, all we did is we changed it to say, we'll help you present like a pro online. And all of a sudden, everybody recognized they weren't good at it. So we went from revenue zero in March of 2020 to our best month in 18 months in August of 2020 to our best month in our company history in September of 2020. 2020, which could have killed my business, ended up being the best thing that ever happened to it. And so I thought that this was a step change in the way that people present. Why would anyone want to go back to presenting in conference rooms and have to fly and travel and inconvenience and eating those shitty sandwiches? Why don't we just do it online? And holding on to that point of view nearly killed my business in 2022 because what was true in 2020 and 2021 became untrue and the matter at hand shifted. And I didn't shift with it. And it was actually Sam who ran my business. There's a line I talk about in Legicide, my first book. And it is that, we should all tell our staff, you're not telling me that I was wrong. You're telling me that I'm no longer right. And that was true. And she came to me and said to me, if you keep us on this path of only doing online events, you're going to kill this company. I'm so glad you did it because you saved us during COVID and we all had jobs. But if you keep us on this path, there will not be a business left to save. And then I had to jettison that business and go back to some of the fundamentals. And she's right. It probably took us a year and a half to recover from me being so sure of my course of action. And then, of course, the next big step change was realizing that AI is rapidly disrupting the creation and generation of really pretty videos and presentation decks. And my team was just not getting behind it, and I had to light a fire, which we did with the creation of too many robots. But that's maybe another story.
Well, let's get to that one in a second. I guess as some of the further evidence of progressing on some of these concepts. But let's go. You mentioned the Legicide and book and concept and so on. So perhaps let's travel a bit of a journey here, a practical journey for anyone listening as to this moment that we're all going through from resistance to change, the inherent human condition that we're a bit resistant to these moments, to then finding those passions, finding those opportunities, and working through into how we tackle them in this moment and so on. So perhaps you can give a bit of background to this Legicide concept, and then where you see that relevance in this very moment as to the sort of overwhelming nature of what we're all facing, and how we can sort of step beyond those change resistances, be that individually or organizationally.
Yeah, and I'll tackle one that I think there's a particular bit of Legicide that exists in the AV industry, and I'll maybe challenge that, and you guys are welcome to challenge me back. So Legicide is a concept very simple. It's very simple. So one of our businesses is called 21 Tanks, and we ran innovation workshops for really big companies. And our business model was very simple. We get into the room and we charge them quite a large amount of money. But the rule is, at the end of the session, the client says, how much of the problem did we solve? And they only pay us that much. So we only solve 50% of the problem. They only pay us 50% of the fee. So we've been running that business model since 2007. And I very quickly realized that businesses didn't have the innovation problem that they thought they did. And the core premise that I came up with, which is the premise of the entire book, was that in an established organization, innovation does not happen when you start doing something new. It happens when you stop doing something old. And they couldn't, because you have to turn off some switches to allow other switches to be available to go on. You have to create space and a vacuum for new ideas. And most of the problems that we were hired for, we were thinking we were going to be creating something new, but in the end, we just had to get them to stop doing something old. And so that was the first premise, or that is the core premise of Legicide as a concept. Now, to make that relevant to the world we live in today, it's amazing. People put a lot of benefit or a lot of thought into futurists. What does the future look like? But nobody gets this right? The very, very few. And in fact, the futurists who've been the most interesting have got it right 30 years in the future. Sometimes people get it right. Arthur C. Clarke can get it right 30 years in the future. But people are very, very bad at getting it right 2 years in the future. I think we'd be far better at looking at historians. And there's two things we can draw from history. The one thing is that the optimists were always correct, is that the march of progress has always improved humanity. We've never got to the point yet where we're a generation. I mean, the Dark Ages may be the one slight blip, but that's actually because people turned off the march of progress. Every other time in history, as we progress, the humans are in better shape than they were before. Now, it might not seem that way to the generation immediately before this because their worldview has changed, but fundamentally that's one thing. And then the second thing is no humans have ever managed to stop the march of progress. So if you want to win, if you're trying to play, and I talk in Relentless Relevance about the concept of the blue team versus the red team. In hacking, the blue team is the internal hackers who have to keep the outside infiltrators out. And the red team are often tiger teams or paid hackers. Ethical hackers are trying to break in to see where the holes are. And the reality is that the red team always wins. Okay, so the hackers outside always manage to break in and then the blue team fixes it. My problem with most businesses that I'm hired to speak for or consult with is that almost all of them want a better blue team strategy. They say, how do we pause this progress? How do we maintain the status quo for longer? When in fact, our argument is always, no, don't, just lead the charge. Be on the red team. Be the disruption. So if you work under the assumption that disruptors are going to win, then why do you want to be on the losing side and then jump at the last minute? What you want to be is on the leading side. And the way that you do that is you go to war with your past success. And most businesses aren't willing to do that. They're not brave enough.
Yeah, I love those concepts. One, I think, just that glass half full premise of in a moment where there's lots of fear right now in terms of what's happening, that embrace that and feel positive about it rather than resist it. But I think I also like the premise that the blue team tends to be that sort of rigid hierarchy, the build the walls and play within the guidelines and so on. Whereas the red team is that creativity, that think different pursuit, and I guess what I see in many in an organization is just because you're not sitting in the boardroom, you're not setting those policies. The red team is in fact your frontline employees that can sort of think different and look at things a little bit differently than the sort of hierarchy that may typically exist within an organization. And I think never more so in this moment right now, where in fact the digital natives are the front lines of our organizations and the ones that are perhaps best placed to start to challenge some of how the AI opportunities of the moment can be applied.
Yeah, and I think there's a mindset shift that needs to happen here. I was speaking with one of my closest friends is also a professional speaker, and he says we need to learn more from the 20-year-olds. I don't think so. I think we need to learn the same stuff as the 20-year-olds. You see, I'd far arrived. I turned 50 last year. And my biggest frustration is that I think a lot of people think that their tank of learning is empty, and that at 50 they've already done their best work. I don't believe that. I believe that the best is yet to come. If you're still here, like Byron, you've just launched a new business. This is going to be the best work you've done in your entire career. Everything has been built up to this point. That makes perfect sense to me. That's the only mindset of going into this. And so now you exist at the intersection of all of the industry wisdom and intelligence you have, but a deep curiosity for the new knowledge that's available. That's the unfair advantage. And the problem with most leaders is that they're worried that their relevance is dying out. But that's not something to worry about. That's something to decide. Only you get to decide how irrelevant or relevant you are. because turning on the relevance, no 20-year-old has more access to prompt, thinking about agentic AI than you do. And in fact, they're so busy in the beginning of their career, most of them are still struggling. Most of us in senior positions, we have staff which gives us time to actually explore these new disruptive technologies. I think the first thing that executives need to decide is that the best is yet to come. And as soon as you embrace that mindset, then you're just going to make that a reality. And the only way to make that a reality is to join the red team. Because if the best is yet to come, the only people who are trying to stay on the blue team are the ones who, peak too early. They captained the rugby team in high school. That's their peak. I have no time for that nonsense.
Yeah, look, I love that premise. And I think in this moment, there's never been more importance in whatever age you are in reinvesting yourself and not waiting for someone to perhaps tell you what to do or teach you what to do, but to stepping out and experimenting and finding those learning opportunities. So let's assume that now we're starting to change some of that mindset. And actually, before we move on, there's a concept that I love in shifting that mindset premise, and that was your concept of streaks over habits and the positivity around the streak premise. So perhaps just because it's resonated with me for so long, maybe you can just give a bit of a premise of changing that positivity mindset to not beating yourself up over change, but actually rewarding yourself for change.
If you want to change anything, you have to habituate it. Right? Change is fundamentally difficult. And in fact, there's an expert's paradox. The better you are at something, the harder it is for you to change. You can improve, but improvement and change are fundamentally different, right? In order to change something, you have to get off the improvement ladder and start again somewhere else. And I realized that this was quite difficult for me to do. And there's lots of books on habits, but they all tell you basically, go and create good habits. But habits are the solution. Once you've habituated something, you've won. Habits are not the tool. Habits are the output. They're the victory condition. If I had to habituate flossing, I have the habit of flossing. I don't have to think about it anymore. I now floss. But you have to create that habit. And I realized years ago that the God particle of habits are streaks. Now, when you start creating anything that you want to habituate or anything you want to turn into a habit, you just simply need to score yourself. You need to create a loss aversion. So let's say you want to try one new AI prompt, for example, every single day. It's not enough just to do that. What you have to do is to have a running score sheet of how many days in a row you've done it. Now, I would say don't ever do 7 days a week. Always bake in failure. So if you miss Thursday, you can do it up on Saturday and you can still maintain your streak. So bake in smart failure. But let's say you say 5 out of 7 days a week, I want to try one new thing in AI or read one new article on AI. Day one is not so, you'll do it. Day number 2, you now have a score. You've now got 2 days in a row. It's now twice as hard to quit the next day. Day number 100, once you have now read one new article on AI every day for 100 days, it's almost impossible for you not to read one on day 101, because that would mean resetting your score. And so what you do is, as soon as anything that you want to turn and get better at, give yourself a cadence and a score. And the score is your streak counter. And we know this works because every single major app in the world has found a way to give you streaks. And they've used these to lock you in. And when you realize that if I don't try this new prompt today, or if I don't read this new article or new newsletter on this today, I will break my 250-day streak. You will not. You will find a way. You'll be 10 minutes before bed, you'll be on that newsletter and you'll be reading it just so that you can actually check the box. And some days you'll just be paying lip service to it, but that's okay. You're just keeping the streak alive. And then you're allowing yourself to be somebody different. Now, for what it's worth, I wrote about this a bit in Relentless Relevance. It was going to be its own book. But I believe that you can use this to lose weight. I believe you can use this to learn more things, to create better, almost anything in your life. If it's worth doing, it's worth scoring. And so create yourself a streak counter for anything of value that you want to create in your life. Anything.
Yeah, I love that. That's so. I think so relevant and important, and the positivity of the streak is the reward that keeps you going rather than beating yourself up on not having achieved something.
You know, a lot of people are on a streak, but they just, because they never scored it, there's no inherent value. But let's say you've gone to gym every Wednesday for the last year. And for some reason you wake up today and you don't feel like going to the gym, or you go at least to the gym, let's say 3 days a week, and you've done that for the last year. Imagine it's Saturday morning and you get a message from the gym and says, Mr. Tarry, we know that you've been coming to the gym 3 times a week for the last 52 weeks. Make sure you get to the gym in the next 24 hours to keep that streak alive. All of a sudden, if you're not like, shit, I've got 52-week streak going, it's inconceivable that you wouldn't find a way of walking in. Even if you walk into the gym, go get yourself a smoothie and walk out again, you'll do it just to keep the streak alive. In fact, that's why Duolingo knows this is so valuable that if you miss a day, they allow you to pay $1 to keep your streak alive. And even though mentally we should be like, well, now it's silly, it's broken, we don't work that way. We're very, very happy to still count this as a streak. Streaks are a superpower that people are not using to get better at things.
The thing in part I like about the streaks premise as well is we're not talking monstrous, crazy big things. We're talking about, fairly achievable, practical, tactical things often. And I think, perhaps if we sort of step forward now into once you can start to sort of change that mindset now, what are those streaks I'm going to create? What are the opportunities for me to go and pursue here? And the pressure, again, from what we see in the media and so on is all about these big transformational moments and so on. Yet, I think you and I both talked in past about the fact that the answer probably doesn't start in taking on the world, eating the elephant in one bite, so to speak. And so, perhaps talk a little bit about perhaps some of your journey and some of your guidance and advisory and what you're seeing in some of the work that you're doing through your Too Many Robots AI consultancy and so on, to where do you start and how do you start to go and find those streaks that will build and compound over time?
We do a lot of work with professional speakers, and we always say at the end of a talk, so we have a framework for speaking. It's give them a reason to care, give them a reason to believe, tell them what they need to know, tell them what they need to do. And the biggest mistake a lot of speakers make at the end of it is when they tell them what they need to do, the ask is huge. So the ask is jump right across the river. And everyone's like, well, I can't jump across the river. I'm not ready to quit my job and start a new business tomorrow. I'm not ready to go from eating meat to becoming a vegan, or becoming from being a vegan to eating meat or whatever. So they do these huge, big asks to people. And we always say, no. Your job, the thing you have to get people to do is to take one step that puts them in the right direction. So if you imagine that it was a river, to my earlier analogy, the thing you're asking people to do is just take the first step onto the first stepping stone of the river. And people often think everything looks too far away, but all you have to do is to create consistent behavior patterns. Now, a great example of this for me is, I don't know if you remember, had you ever seen Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth? From years ago. So it was the only presentation ever to win an Oscar. Our friends at Duarte Design created it with him. It was magnificent. And one of my favorite things about that is this entire presentation, he's showing you that the world is falling apart. And in fact, one of my favorite slides that AV people might remember was that he actually wanted to show how big the problem was. So he got a cherry picker and he stood in the cherry picker and he went all the way up the slide, and then another bit of slide appeared and he went all the way up. It was amazing theater. And so you think the world is in a disaster and it's terrible and there's nothing you can do about it. And then at the end of the talk, he turns around and he says, now you must be feeling that, this is futile and there's nothing we can do. But I believe there is. I believe there's a change that every single human can make. And it's very easy. I'm not asking you to start recycling. I'm not asking you to change everything you do to buy an electric car. I want you to do one little favor for me. The next time you go to the shops, I want you to buy a light bulb. All I want you to do is to buy an energy-saving bulb. Now, right now, this seems crazy because we all have energy-saving bulbs, but I just want you to buy one energy-saving bulb. And that's all I want you to do. And to change each light one at a time, slowly, don't invest money, just one at a time, replace bulbs that are broken with energy-saving bulbs. Now, here's the funny thing that happens there. Once you do that, you become, part of your internal programming is, I am a person that is embracing the environment. And so then, you do that for a few things and you change the bulbs, and then you go and then you do start recycling, and then you start doing the next thing, and everything becomes easier because it becomes ethically and morally consistent or intellectually consistent with actions you're already taking. Now, this is true for almost anything. If trying to do a big thing is always hard because it's big and far away. So all you have to turn around and say is, if we want to be the type of business that embraces AI better, for example, every single week we're going to have a part of our morning stand-up where we all share how we're personally using these tools to do something better. And then you start, then you go from that. Once everybody's doing that and you've habituated that, you then start the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And then eventually you have an organization that's natively thinking this way. Now, we've seen that as a huge problem in Too Many Robots, our fractional AI business, is that, first of all, everyone is playing defense. Everyone is playing defense. So the three biggest constraints that we found that AI adoption is not a technological problem. It's absolutely a cultural problem. This has been something that's just become a truism. And the three things are fear, time, and decision paralysis. I think time is the biggest killer. But fear, they're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. Decision paralysis is so many tools available. Which one are they going to use? But then this time one is everyone turns around and says, we really want to do this, but we're not sure if we have the time. So they would rather wait until they're forced to make the change because they have no time left, rather than getting ahead of the curve and making the changes early. And I think this is the biggest problem, is that people are waiting until they magically have the time to do something, and it's really, really setting them behind.
Yeah, look, I think that time premise is interesting as well, because time in part is one of those return on investment propositions. If I invest a certain amount of time, will I get a return back for that? And in this moment of sort of infinite amounts of information, on the one hand, you get into a paralysis of, I go hunting and it just takes too much to find the needle in the haystack and so on. Yet AI is this unique moment where AI will go and do the hunting and find the needle and bring it to you and so on. So I think there's a mindset shift even there in having to figure out how do I take that time and maybe reinvest that time. Just as if we make some interest on an investment, we take that money and hopefully reinvest. And I think there's this nice analogy to some of those small steps to, if I can just find that half an hour, then let me go reinvest that half an hour in the next thing. And that will become an hour and then 2 hours in my week. And you can build that path to that learning journey and that return on investment just in those small little chunks.
Yeah, I certainly didn't want to make this sound like a sales pitch, but I felt that exact same thing, just to this premise. So when we created the Too Many Robots newsletter, the Too Many Robots newsletter is an appointment that you have to make in your calendar. And it arrives through mid-morning on a Friday. And it is a 30-minute challenge that you have to do to learn a new skill in this space. And we did that because we thought that people need to actually have the behavior in place. It's not enough to read, 4 articles about cool things that can happen with AI. Just teach me one new thing. And so our premise, our entire newsletter, is that you have the Too Many Robots newsletter slot in your calendar on a Friday, or I guess you could wait to the Monday or Tuesday, whenever you want to do it. But the newsletter talks you through the full 30 minutes of you actually learning a new AI skill. And I think that's how we have to be disciplined about this stuff. It's not going to happen by accident. You know what the good thing is? Although this AI seems like it's so crazy, you only have to make the tiniest amount of effort to be the leader in your field in AI. Unless you are in the AI field, people are doing the bare minimum. They're writing better LinkedIn posts. They're creating funny images. But for the most part, if you're trying to just spend 10%, spend half an hour a week looking at process mapping using AI, you'll already be in the top percentile of people in your industry, because nobody is. It's why so many AI speakers they're a dime a dozen, because they show up and they show you something that's so easy to do, but everyone's like, holy shit, that's amazing. It's actually not that amazing. You could do it yourself. If your algorithm is tuned to the same TikTok or Instagram feed as theirs is. And in fact, this is a premise I made for the first time ever in a talk last week, but I really want to land it here. So you got to train your algorithm. If you want to be relevant, if you open up, if you're embarrassed to show somebody what the For You page is in the explore section of your Instagram, that's deeply problematic. The only advantage futurists have over you is that they've trained the algorithm to get them the right content, and you've not. So, and by all means, keep one of the, Instagram or TikTok or whatever for cat videos and funny memes, but make sure the other one, in my case, it's YouTube. My YouTube algorithm is my best employee. Well, it's one of my top employees, I should say. And it's doing a whole bunch of work curating amazing content that makes me on the pointy end of the stick, to use a Byron Tarryism. And that's what I think that we're not doing well. We're not changing our algorithms to serve us better content. Everything you need to know is out there, and nobody alive in the world today has any more advantage than you do in being at the cutting edge.
Yeah, I love that premise. Listen, we're almost at time here. I think we'll have to reschedule another session to get into some of the premises of swarm thinking and of storytelling and so on that are so powerful. But what's I think you've already given a whole lot of next steps, I guess, for people. But to someone who's anywhere in the organization that sees the opportunity, has the passion, but doesn't really know where to start. Any sort of parting thoughts for where they should go out today or tomorrow and just start to build that streak? What are some of the practical things that you or some of your team are doing as maybe not the experts, because there are no experts at the moment, but certainly the forward leaders, and how can they then sort of drive that momentum themselves and ultimately into others?
If you're a leader of a business, you have a blind spot, the expert's paradox. I mean, Socrates famously was anti-writing. He felt writing was a technology that would make people stupid. So he didn't write anything down, because he felt that then if you had the written word, you thought you had knowledge, but you just had an item of knowledge. It was only actually knowledge once it was inside your brain. A lot of people are thinking the same thing with AI today. But experts often get it wrong. But there are people inside your business that aren't. By the way, it was Plato, Socrates' student, who wrote down Socrates' learning. Ironically, that's why we know about him, because of the written word. But if you're an expert in your business, if you're a leader in your business, that line I mentioned that Sam said to me, I would love you to do a talk to your team and tell them, please, if you think of something new in our business, don't come to me, don't worry. You're not telling me that I was wrong. You're telling me that I'm no longer right. That changes everything, because there's no guilt. For me to come to you, say to you, Byron, 2 years ago, you said to us this. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying you may no longer be right. This technology can now do this. It's not an attack on you. It's just an observation. But because you're on the cutting edge, because you're so close, you have all the blind spots of success. Success is the ultimate blind spot. And you need people that don't share that blind spot further down your organization and give them permission to come and give you this. So it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle, to quote Howard Mann. And so you have to allow other people in your organization to break that bottle, that bottle that's holding you in the blue team. And so I think you have to do that. And then personally, every single Monday morning, every Monday you should be opening up, read the news, and you should have a matter at hand session. At some stage every single week in your business, you should be asking yourself, are we still appropriate to the matter at hand? And the only way you can effectively answer this question is, what is the matter at hand? If I could go to war with the AV industry in one way, I could get myself into trouble. The matter at hand used to be that we needed a way of getting 20 people online at the same time. So we had one camera pointing to a boardroom full of people all sitting around a table. That's not the matter at hand anymore. Nobody needs that. Every single person can have their own video feed, and every single person can be up close and personal. But I constantly get into debates with AV professionals who are still trying to make that old technology improved and better, but it's actually just a step back. The worst meetings for everybody are when one person is talking to a boardroom full of 20 people. Nobody likes that. But it solved a problem that we technologically had a decade and a half ago that we no longer have now. but we're still trying to solve that problem like it was 15 years ago. So we've got to slay legacy thinking. We've got to ask, what is the matter at hand?
Love that. Look, great insights today, and I think from that leadership premise, that leadership can come from anywhere if you have that mindset. It doesn't have to come from the top of the organization. And so, I guess my empowerment to all as well would be to take some of those leadership lessons to recognize the blind spots, to encourage that collaborative process of testing things, and foundationally one element of our industry is collaboration, that it's not about a top-down message. It's about getting in a room, and in this AI age where AI becomes a digital collaborant for you, that those lessons can apply to your AI journey and how you engage AI as much as they can apply to the people around you. And in fact, you can even test some of those lessons on AI before you start to scale them into the people around you. But thank you so much, Rich. The testing of everything, I think, is so important in this moment, and as you know, have admired the way you can break things down into simple premises for so long. So thank you for that. One last thing, I guess, because I just love that Too Many Robots newsletter premise. How can people perhaps find the newsletter and learn a bit more about Too Many Robots generally, but certainly about some of that thinking and testing things in a different way?
Yeah, please, by all means, go to toomanyrobots.wtf. If you're lazy, tmr.wtf will get you there as well. I think WTF is the greatest top-level domain in the world today. And then, feel free to sign up there, give us feedback, let us know. But if you're going to do it, set aside the time. Right? This is tacit learning. Make yourself good. Give yourself the time to be good. Don't just consume. If you want to hear more from me, if you go to getrich.af, that'll just forward to richmulholland.com, where you can find out about me there, or ineedmissinglink.com. And then finally, if you go onto Amazon or anywhere that you find books, you'll be able to find Relentless Relevance, and hopefully that'll help you figure out what the matter at hand is. Awesome.
Well, highly recommend. I mean, I often try and share places to go for people to sort of continue their journeys of thought leaders elsewhere, and couldn't recommend more, even though it's not necessarily all about AI, a lot of your feeds and so on. But thanks again, Rich. As always, awesome to chat. I learn something every time, and hope that all the listeners did as well. So thanks again.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.